Greetings and welcome to everyone on the call, especially Brighton Town Council member Nate Salzman, who agreed to join after we invited him to meet with the group in the hopes of building the broadest possible coalition before the Brighton Democratic Committee designating meeting. To make the most efficient use of time, we're going to dive straight into the agenda, which will start with a few ground rules for constructive political discourse in this online forum. One slide on justice in action and its aspirations in the local political scene, an introduction of Nate Salzman, then we will give Mr. Salzman the floor so he can give us his stump speech and answer questions. We are in an online forum, so it's especially important that only one person speak at a time. Please keep your client muted unless you have something to say. When speaking of experiences, it is important to use I language, bringing your own unique perspective and not ascribing it to others. It should go without saying that ad hominem attacks are unacceptable. We are not here to attack anyone. We want to traffic in facts and discuss issues dispassionately. If you wish to speak, please use the raised hand feature in Zoom. It is in the react button. If circumstances warrant, we may use a progressive stack that favors people who have not yet spoken, for example, over people who have already been given the floor. A properly administered progressive stack also favors members of marginalized communities. Finally, we've left chat enabled, but ask that you use it judiciously, and I may not be able to respond to private chat sent to me. Does anyone have any issues they want to raise amidst the ground rules we've discussed? We want to make the best use of time so we can move on from this slide, if not. All right. This slide gives an overview of the Justice in Action Coalition and its purpose and political aspirations. Robin and I have been progressive activists for the past 20 years, advocating for policies that serve the people, getting money out of politics to make America less of an oligarchy, implementing healthcare for all to make healthcare more accessible and affordable to everyone, housing justice, such as making housing more affordable, more equitable taxation, reforming immigration to be fairer and more inclusive, redirecting resources from military aid towards social programs, and reimagining public safety. You may be surprised at how some of these policy objectives intersect with Brighton Town politics. Nate has served on the Brighton Town Council for 2 years now. In his letter of intent and other campaign materials at the time, he described himself as a longtime political operative. So those are his words, not mine. He co-founded the political consulting firm Tuesday Digital with Stephen DeVay, who has been chair of the Monroe County Democratic Committee since 2022. Nate also has deep associations with the Jewish Federation of Rochester. But before we talk about that, we should say that in 2021, he was elected president of the Young Democrats of Monroe County, an arm of the Monroe County Democratic Committee. And since that picture was taken, he and his fellow Young Democrats have been steadily building power. This recent picture, posted around Thanksgiving, include Nate and his family, MCDC Vice Chair Anthony Lozinski, former MCDC Chair Zach Pileski-King, current MCDC Chair Stephen DeVay, Majority Leader of the Monroe County Legislature, Yversha Roman. I think I'm missing a few, but you get the point. Nate is embedded in the Democratic Party infrastructure even more deeply than Supervisor Moehle. From a policy perspective, I would highlight that one of Nate's signature policy positions centers on abundance, as described by Ezra Klein in a recent book of that name. Nate and Senator Cooney appeared on WXXI in September to talk about the book. Just yesterday, progressive firebrand Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts gave a speech specifically decrying the abundance agenda as, quote, a rallying cry for wealthy donors and corporate-aligned Democrats. In 2024, Nate organized a designating petition campaign that was aimed directly at undermining the Justice in Action Coalition. This slide has a partial list of candidates. Some incumbent candidates, such as Meredith Dragon, Nate himself, and Jewish Federation President Dan Cannell, were assigned by town leader Barbara Moehle. Others appeared on petitions circulated in election districts, specifically where GIA candidates had been petitioned on. As you can see, there is tremendous representation of Jewish Federation affiliated people, as well as a few who appeared at town board meetings attacking Robin Wilt. Sanjay Hiranandani deserves special mention because he is a mega donor without any discernible political alignment. He donates to Republican and Democratic candidates. He donated to the Brighton Republican Party in 2019 before he was even registered to vote. And he donated $50,000 to Jeremy Cooney in the 2018 and 2020 election cycles. This photo was posted by Senator Cooney to signal his support for Clara Sanguinetti, whom Sanjay supported, but it is reasonable to think of it as a picture of a political mega donor showing off to politicians whom he has purchased. This image illustrates some of the magic we use behind the scenes to analyze the voter database. Here we can see that Sanjay was a registered libertarian starting in 2021 when he first registered to vote. His wife Allison was unaffiliated with any political party, and they both switched their registrations to Democrat in January 2023 when Vic Vilko was running for Brighton Town Justice. Meredith Dragon had led a years-long campaign of abuse of Robin Wilt, posting lies about her activism and assassinating her character. After Robin appeared on Connections to discuss the motivations bringing Black Americans to the Palestinian cause, Meredith co-wrote an open letter with Lauren Deutsch, who had distinguished herself by attacking Robin at town board meetings in 2021. Another person petitioned on by Nate was Aileen Kaufman, whose rants and social media posts attacking Robin in 2021 could accurately be characterized as unhinged. This slide gives another window into the behind-the-scenes work we do. The Board of Elections provides scanned copies of every designating petition submitted. This one triggered a primary against Robin and myself in our home election district. But what's really interesting about this petition is that Nate's parents-in-law, Al and Sandy Parisi, are longtime members of the committee representing this election district. Their own signatures appear on lines 2 through 4 of the sheet, meaning they signed petition sheets triggering a primary against themselves. Some of these candidates later submitted declinations, so the Parisis and the Hiranandanis now represent the 8th election district. So I think everyone on this call deserves a measure of credit for being willing to engage in dialogue here. My family has been subjected to online abuse, up to and including threats that required interventions by the police. And Nate is being openly supported by people who have engaged in that behavior. Yet, here we are in a safe space for everyone, where we can hear from Nate about his aspirations for the town of Brighton and why GM members should support him for town supervisor. Nate, before I give you the floor, I want to highlight a comment attributed to you by WXXI in yesterday's news coverage of your announcement. You said you'd called every member of the committee, but we know that there are several people in this meeting whom you did not call. This meeting was scheduled after I reached out to you on Saturday. Our first question to you is going to be, given that if elected, you will be supervisor of all Brightonians, not just white people, not just Jewish people, not just rich people, not just Jewish Federation board members and donors. Why didn't you actually call everyone on the committee? And we do have other questions relating more directly to town business. And I know that was a lot, but with that, you have the floor.
I don't know if I've ever gotten an introduction like that before. I'll tell you, that was a lot to address there, Nick. But I guess I'll start with the last slide. When I was talking to Brian over the phone, I was trying to say I'm calling 150 members and going to engage with 150 members. And that's why, Nick, when you called me, I think I called you back in a few hours. As soon as I got out of my last coffee meeting, I saw your voicemail and I called you back. Because it's one thing that I believe in is you have to engage with everybody. That, especially, Nick and Gia. And I want to say this before we start. I'm so grateful for you all being here tonight to listen to, some ideas that I have around the town of Brighton. Just as importantly, I want to hear some ideas that you guys have around the town of Brighton. And, I know that, Gia supported two candidates. Rachel, I see you on the call, and I'm glad to see you here. And Jesus, two really capable, strong candidates for town board. And we ran a competitive primary. And it's still my job to come out and hear what you have to say and read your emails or respond to them and work with Gia, regardless of who you've supported in the primary. And now that I'm seeking new election, it's my job to go out and hear what you have to say again, and try and do my best to work with you where we can and respectfully disagree where we have to. And I'll say this: I am coming here under no obligation, under no you guys do not owe me your support, and I do not expect to come here and have people say, "Hey, I'm so excited to support the guy who ran against our ticket 2 years ago." Like I understand where we are, and I still really appreciate you having me here. So I'll tell you why I'm running. When I ran for town board in 2023, I went on the town website. I saw this Envision Brighton plan, a plan that Robin was a part of putting together. It was a resident-led document that was put together by consultants that was voted on by the town board back in 2000, 8 years ago. And this report calls for a few things. It calls for the revitalization of our commercial corridors, helping build small businesses instead of just big empty parking lots. This plan called for more housing of all sizes, from apartments to senior living. This plan called for an expansion of green energy infrastructure. And I got when I was elected, I was excited to get to work. I immediately started writing code, and the code, by the way, I'm not claiming to have invented any of these ideas. These are ideas right from the report, and as I'm sure Robin could tell you. And so I took just one example, parking minimums, and I said, "Hey, look, we have a code here that says there's a mandatory minimum on how many parking spaces you must have if you're a small business. And this is holding our Monroe Avenue corridor back. You could see just big empty parking lot after big empty parking lot." So I said, well, look, let's eliminate the mandatory parking minimum for that main corridor so we can build more housing, allow more small businesses to thrive. Well, I drafted the code language. I sent it to the committee chair of the subcommittee where it would be appropriate, and there it died. And this happened again and again, one recommendation from the Envision 2028 plan after another. And so, it brings me to my next point. I think transparency is a major issue. I think there are people in this town, I think that maybe some of you folks may agree with this, who are shut out of the process. We have I'll tell you this, most of the constituent emails I end up responding to or phone calls I end up returning are people saying, "Nate, I emailed this department, I emailed that department. Why isn't anyone getting back to me?" And I'll give you an example. I see Lauren Messi on the call. The pool announcement that took me by surprise, that I read about it at the same time the residents did. And when I contacted the supervisor's office, what I was told was it's a done deal. It's based off the community center report that calls for the pool to be moved from town hall to a brand new community center at Buckland. It's all in the report. And I said, okay, great. Send me the report. I haven't seen it. It was done 5 years ago. And I was told, well, it's not done yet. It's not ready yet. We're working on it. So what it leads to is residents show up, they're upset. They're saying, "Hey, the pool was just announced that we're closing and we had no input." And we've got behind the scenes conversations that, somebody has seen a report that says it's a good idea, not me. And I don't want to speak for my former colleague Robin Wilt here, but I don't know if you saw it either. And it just made me very uncomfortable. We were making decisions. We're just telling the residents, this is the decision. It's already made. Now leave us alone. And so I would have Q&A sessions per issue. I think we should have an electronic newsletter for any resident who wants to sign up. I think we should have online summaries of each town board decision before they're made. And I'll bring up one other example that was troubling. We switched from weekly recycling to biweekly recycling, and it was a change, and it was something that I voted for. And it was something that I got hundreds of emails and calls, people that were really upset about the changes that were being made. And I got to tell you, when we were in those meetings voting for it, there were no residents. That's not the residents' fault. It's because we're not planning ahead and we're not telling people we're about to make a major decision. So nobody shows. That's our fault. Our fault. That's on us. So over the course of the year, I sat with everybody who wrote me an angry email about garbage. I said, hey, please, I'd love to hear your perspective. And for a year, I went to every public works meeting, and I said to my colleagues, I said, I will not vote to just automatically renew this contract unless we can at least re-RFP the bid to get us back to weekly recycling. And every month I was told, Nate, it's going to be too expensive. We're not going to bother with the RFP. I said, okay, look, as an individual council member, I don't have any staff, right? I cannot force an RFP. Fine. So every meeting I said, if we don't re-RFP, I'm voting no. And when it came to the board meeting to vote, myself and Councilmember Wilt were the only two people that voted no on the contract. And I don't want to speak for Councilmember Wilt, but I'll tell you, I voted no because it's not fair to the community that we made this decision with nobody around, and then 12 months later, we renewed it with no new information. So transparency is a big issue for me. We also have these volunteer boards. We have the planning board, we have the zoning board, we have the Parks and Recreation board. These town committees that have open seats that make recommendations. The idea board started by Councilmember Wilt that make big decisions, but we don't engage the community to join these board positions, or we only engage certain people to apply for these positions. Within the first 30 days of my tenure as town supervisor, I want to make sure we fill every volunteer position, and we are not going to be vetting for political statements who's for and who's against. If there are folks who say, Nate, I think you're doing a terrible job, I'm going to say, great, come join the planning board because I'd love to hear other opinions. So I think that we should be much more transparent as a government. And I'll just say this last piece because I'd love to get to your questions. And Nick, you cut me off whenever I'm talking too long. I think housing is a big component. I'll tell you that I think that there's a lot of talks about tax burden in this town, and I'm not running for office to tell everybody, hey, I'm going to cut taxes. I'm not going to do that. We have really great services in this town, and people are willing to pay for great services. But what we need to do, and this is where the abundance Democrat comes in, and I'll just say quick point on Elizabeth Warren. I don't think Elizabeth Warren is wrong when she talks about, hey, look, the abundance agenda missed out on the fact that there are like the wealthier folks are suppressing. I think it's a yes and. Abundance is not the solution to all of our problems. It's not. I say I'm an abundance Democrat in that I think that rather than a scarcity mindset of let's fight over limited resources, we should build more of what we need. Hey, energy costs are going up. So my proposal is, well, let's build more green energy, expand our grid. Hey, housing costs are going through the roof, and it's unaffordable for people to live in Brighton. Well, my solution to that is let's build more apartments. Let's build more housing. Let's build more senior level housing, middle housing as well. So I guess that's how I would define myself. And I'd say there's a little bit of a distinction there, but I think Elizabeth Warren's criticism, I understand it. I would just say it's a yes and. And I'm not talking about changing the character of neighborhoods when I'm talking about building more housing. I'm talking about big empty plazas, Winton Place Plaza, along Monroe Avenue, building vertically, allowing for a coffee shop to then have apartments on top. And then, another piece is incentive zoning, I think gets in the way a lot. We have a very tightly restricted code. And so what will happen is if you're a developer and you want to come in and you want to build your Whole Foods, your Top Golf, okay, you can hire your team attorneys, you can go to the supervisor's office, you can negotiate, and 12 months later, the board members, we all find out about it at the same time. Hey, it's a package deal. It's done. Here are the amenities the town's getting. We've been negotiating for a year. Vote yes or no. Well, that's not a fair process. It's not fair if you're, Nick's coffee shop and you want to go on Monroe Avenue that Nick has to hire an attorney and negotiate in secret. I say we take incentive zoning and we put it in the public eye. We put it at the public safety meeting. We put it in front of the entire town board. We put it online on the electronic town board summary. So if Nick comes in and says, I'd like an exemption to have outdoor dining at my coffee shop, we can negotiate and say, is that something we as a town want? Should we grant the exemption and should we allow for that outdoor dining? And maybe, you know what, Councilmember Wilt makes a good point. Can you have a bike rack? That's the incentive you give to the town. Or if it's a check, could you write a check to fix the sidewalk in front of your shop? Let's make good projects better instead of just totally axing projects if the developer or the business owner can't afford an attorney. And the power dynamic, it makes me uncomfortable that there's just a business owner in the supervisor's office negotiating over how big the check is going to be. I just think that's a bad way to do politics. It's a bad way to do government. So I know I threw a lot at you. I'm really interested in learning about your perspective and hearing your ideas. So I'll stop talking now.
Yes.
Nick, if it's okay with you, open the floor to
Well,
question.
we have a couple of questions that we
Great.
discussed ahead of time.
Good.
And I'm going to move one of them up because you've talked about housing a couple times.
Yeah.
And I think every Brightonian probably knows that Brighton is one of the most developed suburbs in Monroe County. So the question is, if you want more housing in Brighton, why did you vote to rezone a tract from dense housing to commercial to accommodate Topgolf?
Yeah.
And would you revisit this decision in light that the Topgolf development does not appear to be proceeding?
It's a good question, Nick. I'll tell you this. I think it fits into the larger conversation around incentive zoning. I know that, and I know when it was presented to the board, and Councilmember Wilt, please, you're in the same meetings I am. So if you want to correct me if I get the timing wrong, you just go ahead and correct me. My understanding was that negotiation happened over a long period of time. We were presented with this thing's ready to go. There are no other options. There's no housing tract possible. And by the way, that was a housing for large homes. It was not like condos or townhouses. It was specifically zoned for large homes. And we were told there was no proposal to build housing there. This is it. This is all we got. And it's been negotiated for over a year. And here's a package. Vote on it tomorrow. And when presented with that little information, it's hard to make the right decision. And I think it's why you see so many 5-0 votes on the town board, not because five people come to the same conclusion all the time, but because when given little information, it's hard to really sort through for yourself all of the options. So what I would prefer, Nick, is when Topgolf first approached, that's when the board should have learned about it. And if there's a housing development that approached or housing developer or small business developer, they should all be able to approach the full board in a public setting. And so with given the little information that I had, you know what, I think that's a fair question. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've always made the right decision. I've always voted the right way. I'm by far from a perfect person. I'll tell you that. But that's an interesting question. If given more information, I tell you this, I would like to open up our zoning code. I'll tell you, on Winton Place Plaza, where Fox's Deli is and OFC Creations, that's a big empty parking lot. I had a developer call me and he said, Nate, I can't believe you guys shut down our idea for a brand new apartment there, a complex. We're going to do some green space, community areas, an apartment, affordable apartment living. Why did you guys kill that proposal? And I said to the developer, I've never heard this idea before. He said, oh, sure, I presented to the supervisor. And then you guys call, and then I got a call back the next day saying, no, thanks. I think there's places to build housing. We are developed. There's a lot of development, Nick, but there are places to build housing. And there's a study on Monroe County's Comida website that shows that Brighton, New York, we permit far less housing than any comparable suburb in Monroe County. And we are not the most overly developed town. So I think there's no excuse for why we can't be building more housing.
Before we move on, I want to check in with Robin and see if she wants to
Yeah, yeah.
speak to the process leading up to the Top Golf vote.
Yeah, there are closed door meetings with the supervisor directly with developers, and that I do perceive that as a problem. But there is also the opportunity for colleagues to connect with one another, and that Nate was never interested in that. I that was a 4-1 vote because I opposed the rezoning because we are in the middle of a housing crisis in Monroe County, including Brighton. That's why we have rapidly escalating home prices because we have a dearth of inventory. And to rezone one of the few, and it was zoned for high density. There's high density across the street.
It
Um,
was done for, okay.
in Rochester, and so that was one of the reasons that I voted against rezoning that parcel. Then I was told after the fact that there was another incentive zoning application in to rezone another parcel for high density housing. But again, yes, that is part of the problem. It does tend to be the initial interaction does tend to be with the town supervisor and the developer. And so if it doesn't make it past that initial review, then the town board is likely to never hear about it. But again, Nate was part of the tendency on the town board to kind of isolate me and not discuss it. I mean, we agreed with regard to to waste management, but there was never any attempt to interact in with regard to that issue, and there was never any attempt to interact with regard to the pool. There was no so part of the marginalization the culture. Nate was definitely bought into that.
Well, Robin, I'm sorry that you feel like um, that was your experience working with me. I felt like we've always had a cordial relationship. We served on the subcommittee board together. We sat next to each other. Um, and look, I'd say this. I think that, we've been opposed in the political arena. We've endorsed different candidates, but at the end of that all, I think that, I said this to Nick the other day. I respect and admire the fact that you are dedicating your career to serving the public. And, any person who puts themselves out there to serve the public is somebody that has my respect and admiration. And even when we disagree on candidates or on issues, I do have a deep sense of respect for you. I really do. And, we've always had, I felt we've always had pleasant interactions on the board.
I keep it professional, but
Sure.
Okay, this next question was going to be earlier. That question on the dense housing vote got moved up.
Yeah.
Getting money out of politics is a signature progressive issue. You have raised $55,000 for a town supervisor race. If I'm not mistaken, that is a record in modern Brighton history. Unprecedented amount of money for an election with 13,000 voters. And I'm just going to throw this in here because
Yeah.
Rachel's on the call and you name dropped her. You benefited from a $115,000 IEC expenditure that attacked her in ways that were really outside what I consider and what I think most reasonable people would consider the bounds of political discourse. Will you refuse IEC support in this election cycle?
Yeah, yes. And I'll tell you this, Nick, I agree with you. The only part I'd amend is I don't think anyone benefited from what happened. What happened to Rachel was wrong. I denounced it immediately. I spent my own personal. I was out of campaign cash at that point. I spent my own money. I put $5,000 in the last second. I had my family stay up all night with me. I asked my family to stay up all night with me, stuffing mailers to condemn it to mail to each voter because I thought it wasn't enough just to put out a social media statement condemning it. I wanted to mail every person. And I'll tell you this, when I went door to door after that mailer went out, I met voter after voter who told me how disgusted they were with it and how they weren't going to be supporting me because of it. And I understood. I think voters had every right to feel that way. I think Rachel has every right to be pissed off about what happened. It was gross. When I looked into who it was a Republican consultant out of New York City. I looked in the federal election law. I wanted to know if I could sue the person who for using my name without my permission. I was told that I had no. I'm sorry, Julia. Go ahead. I
That
don't. I,
was not true. This was a woman from Dawn Goodell who lives in Pittsford. Her husband is on the board of the of JFed. That's where the money came from. It also came from Richard Goldrick. So it came from JFed.
I'm sorry. I'm
So
sorry. I
what you're
should
saying is
clarify
wrong.
that. I'm sorry, Julia. I should clarify. The consultant that
Yes, New York City, but they hired him. The money came from the people in town here. Money
I
came from
understand.
JFed members. I've run into Dawn. Dawn was an old friend of mine, no longer. And she basically said, some friends of mine told me I should do this. And so
Yeah.
she was following orders, and it did hurt. It did hurt Rachel. It did
Yeah.
help you, no matter what you're saying, because we saw the results.
Well, I think we can. Well, I think we can agree to disagree on whether I was. I think it was a terrible thing that happened. I wanted to call the whoever was running it at the time. At the time, I had no
Hmm.
idea where the money came from. All I was doing was following the name on the bottom, the committee
So
to
where does your
whatever.
$54,000 come from now? Where does that come from?
Okay, yeah, I'll answer that question. I've got just calling people in this town, and our limit is $1,000 is the limit. Um, and that's the most I can accept from anybody. I got very few of those donations. I raised about $33,000 from individuals in this town, and then I put about $20,000 of my own cash in because I feel like when you're asking people for money, you have to be willing to invest yourself. And so that's how I got to the $55,000. I got raised about 35, and then I put in 20. But look, I wish that I could have called up the IEC and said, basically, go to hell. I mean, it was totally out of bounds. I hope that they're banned federally. I would. Yeah, I'm sorry, Rachel. I see your hand. Go ahead.
Absolutely finish what you were saying. I just have a
Okay.
question.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. I think will I? So the question Nick asked me was, will I? Yeah, I would tell whoever is out there listening. I do not want any IEC funds spent supporting my candidacy, period. If there's a dollar of IEC funds spent supporting my campaign or trashing Bill's campaign, I will condemn it immediately. I will send letters reinforcing that. And I want it out there that I don't want that money. I will condemn the message, whether it's positive for me or negative against Bill. I don't want it in Brighton politics. I do not want to be associated with it.
So that I'm trying to imagine what that would look like, Nate, and I'm imagining the
Yeah.
type of earned media engagement that you did for your announcement yesterday. Is that fair?
Say that again. What that would look like?
A press conference, press materials, appearance on WXXI and whichever other news organizations want
I'd say
to
that. I'd say that to everybody. I'd say
cover.
I do not want. Yeah, I do not want. And I'll tell you this. I was I was like stunned these folks and Dawn Goodell, I've never met her. Obviously I found out about her through these stories. Um, I was shocked at why they would get involved, why they were talking about Nate will be tough on crime um, in a Democratic primary when that was not my message. It was just I didn't understand it, and I didn't understand it. I don't want it. I'll condemn it, and I guess there's not much else to say. I mean, I was offended by it, and what happened to Rachel was unacceptable, and I think Rachel has every right to be angry as hell about it. I mean, I certainly am. I certainly am. And
Okay, I see a question from Alexi in the chat, but
yeah,
I have one or two questions that were raised previously that I want to get to first, if Alexi doesn't mind.
yeah,
Now,
far away.
amidst the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, Governor Andrew Cuomo issued Executive Order 203, ordering every municipality to develop a plan to improve equity in policing across New York State.
Yeah.
The town of Brighton's EOT 203 plan stipulated that the Brighton Police Department would start collecting statistics on the demographics of people affected by traffic stops. In 2022, the first such report was published and showed that 30% of traffic citations were issued to Black people. Brighton is 6% Black. The Brighton plan requires annual reporting, but the statistic has not been published since.
Mm-hmm.
Will you commit to restarting the policy of gathering and publishing the statistics, studying the historic injustice, and undertaking a course of action to improve?
Yes. And I'll tell you this, Robin was on the Public Safety Committee, and I sat there, and I know Robin made the case for this data to be released. And Robin, there were delays in getting the information released. I've never heard anyone tell you a good reason why it shouldn't be released.
Yeah,
I see you're unmuting.
yeah. You were the chair. I was co-chair. Never did you I was always the one to bring up the fact that we had not addressed these disparities. I didn't see you as a partner in trying to get the report examined. Yeah, so here we are.
So I became chair of public safety at January 1, but I was not chair of public safety when you and I were serving together. But fair point that but I don't see a reason why we shouldn't be releasing that data. I can't think of a compelling reason. My understanding was there is some bureaucratic delay. I don't understand why we wouldn't be releasing the data. In my announcement, I said I want radical transparency. This seems to fall in line of this is a no-brainer. This is something that we should be doing. And yeah, Councilmember Will should be credited with leading the push to do this.
So Nate, I want to follow up real quick and say that I do think we'd be in a better place if we had the data and the data were public, but it's been several years and the data could be studied. There are many possible explanations for why the disparity exists.
Yeah.
And the town has chosen not to spend any money or allocate any resources undertaking a study to figure out how to ameliorate the situation. So I think I would characterize the publication of the data as necessary, but not sufficient.
I think that's a fair point, Nick. I think it's a fair point.
Okay.
But I think first step is we need to get the data out there to the public. And then I'd love to work with the idea board to hear recommendations on where we go from there. I'll tell you this, I don't mean to say that, Nick, as a pass off on responsibility. I think that the key is you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, who have different perspectives, and you listen to those folks. So I'm not here to tell you I have every answer. I've done everything right in my career. I certainly do not make that claim.
Sure. So before okay, someone needs to mute. Uh, sorry, can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Can you speak to Brighton's status? And I'm saying this as there's national news being made as rather historic conflicts are happening in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Can you speak to Brighton's status as a sanctuary town? What measures will you take to protect immigrants in Brighton if ICE comes to town?
Yeah. I'll tell you this. I think this is one where we all agreed on the town board. We all continue to agree. And one that is universally agreed upon by the majority of Brighton residents. We do not want ICE, masked disappearing people out of our community, period. I think it's the biggest strength of our town's police force is that we don't have to rely on a larger body of government to enforce this. We can say, and we did pass a directive unanimously that said, our local law enforcement will not cooperate with ICE. I would like to see on the federal level legislation that, I mean, knock on wood, hopefully we take back the House and the Senate. I would like to see the masked ICE officials dragged before a public hearing. I want to see them held accountable for arresting people with no warrants, disappearing people for months at a time, up to years at a time, without a trial, without a fair hearing, breaking apart families, ripping apart the fabric of our community. I'll tell you, I'm trying to think if I have permission to share a story. My wife's family is Puerto Rican. My mother-in-law is from Puerto Rico. My wife and her mom speak Spanish in public often. And since Trump has got elected, they've been somewhere out in public in Rochester and have had insults hurled at them. Go back to your own country type of stuff. For speaking Spanish. And Brighton is not perfect, but we are a town that everybody should feel welcome. No matter your religion, your race, your political persuasion, you should feel welcome here. And it's the thing that makes me angriest about what's happening in our federal government right now is we are disappearing people off of the street. And God, I hope that when we retake the House and the Senate and the White House, that these guys are held accountable. I don't think there's anything more. Well, there's a lot that's happening in this country that's offensive. To me, on a personal level, there's nothing more offensive. And I told this story at my campaign kickoff last night. My great grandparents came over, escaping the Holocaust, escaping pogroms. They spoke Yiddish and they drove cabs. And, God forbid there was a federal force out there that was disappearing, guys with beards and yarmulkes who didn't speak English, because my ancestors would have been in that internment camp, and it's downright un-American and deeply offensive. And I'll tell you this, as supervisor, I hope I hope to do everything in my power to make sure that we do not assist in these operations.
Okay, it looks like Alexi's dropped off the call perhaps, but anyone with access to the chat can see that he asked a question. Would you consider requiring town information systems to add a public user allowing the public to search and retrieve town public records anonymously to increase transparency?
That's an interesting question.
And
I'll
hang on a
this.
sec, Nate. I want to invite
Go
people
ahead.
on the call also to either raise their hands or write questions into chat. I have other questions on the spike, as it were, in the queue, but I don't want to be the only person curating this interaction. So let's speak to Alexi's question, and hopefully we'll have some other questions from the floor.
Yeah, if I understand Alexi correct, because I would hold in-person and online Q&As. I would publish all information online and include summaries. I would also have an online portal. So if Rachel put in there's a pothole on my street, she could track, okay, exactly who has it now and then get a timely response. I would also have staff I mean, Councilmember Wilt and I voted for this and it was changed under our nose. I would have a communications director and I would have dedicated staff just to doing constituent services work, getting back to the public. Because not everybody needs a call back from the supervisor, which is, I think, the culture now is they should only hear back from one person. I think that everybody just needs a call back timely. And to Alexi's question, I just want to make sure I understand correctly, and I should probably talk to an attorney to make sure I know exactly which records can be made public and can be searchable, but we should make any record that can be made public.
I think again, I don't want to put words in Alexi's mouth, but I
Yeah.
think that when you do search, you do identify yourself. And I know that this type of thing was weaponized against us in another community where we would make
Oh.
public records requests, and then they would list the people who made public records requests and the amount of time and money that they spent fulfilling that public record request. And so
Oh.
it basically weaponized the FOIL process. And I think Alexi is saying, can you make it so you can anonymously, as a public user, search public records so that you can preserve the person's privacy who's doing the searching, and then at the same time maintain the transparency.
Are they doing that? I mean, that sounds, that sounds a little scary that they're doing that. And I believe you, but wow. Are they doing that as part of a FOIL requirement that says, by law, if you are requesting this document, we need to have your name on file?
I don't think that if it's a public record, I don't think that you need to identify who is requesting that public record. So Alexi raises a valid point.
Yeah.
We do collect the information, but I don't know that it's necessary to collect the information.
Now,
Interesting. I'd like to, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I also don't want to put words in Alexi's mouth, but as someone who goes to the Monroe County clerk's website, I can say that there is the option of accessing the records as a guest, and it does not require you to identify yourself. So he may be modeling the request in, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but that type of anonymized access to public records might be what his question was getting at. And I think he might be saying that the town of Brighton does not have that facility right now.
Well, thank you very much for bringing that up to Alexi and Nick and Robin for clarifying that. I would like to learn more about that. We should not be weaponizing records requests. That seems counter to transparency goals.
Okay, I don't see any raised hands or further questions in the chat, so I'm just going to move on. Do you consider Brighton Town Supervisor a stepping stone to higher office? How long do you expect to serve in this role? What higher offices, if any, would you aspire to?
Yeah, I'll tell you, no, I don't consider it as a stepping stone. I ran for office in 23 to do a lot of what I talked about here. And what I found as a council member is I can't get the job done. And so when faced with the prospect of running for reelection in 2027, to go back to the residents who just elected me and to say, well, geez, what did I get done? I started to say, well, I haven't done enough. And I haven't done enough because the structure of our government, of our town government is too top down. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to see 5 town board members introducing their own legislation, discussing it, debating it in public, and also at the subcommittee meetings and in the public town board meetings. I'd like to democratize the town board. That's the job I would like to do. Your question about stepping stone, Nick, I don't have a job title in mind that I've always been going for. I'm chasing the work. I'm really passionate about town government. I love to talk about zoning code. I love to talk about the back and forth around housing, expanding green energy infrastructure. I love this town. I want us to grow and improve. and I'm chasing that work. I'm not chasing a particular job title. Now, I can tell you, I don't think anybody should be supervisor for 30 years. Um, but I don't. This is not just, hey, I'm trying to climb the ladder here. This is just I am anxious to get the job done that I set out to do. And just sitting there on the town board as a council member, with a nice title, and we get to go to the ribbon cuttings, is just not good enough. I feel like if I'm going to participate in government and politics, I want to actually get work done, and that's why I'm running for office.
Okay, thank you. Let me see. Now, Town Supervisor Bill Moehle publicly stated that the public pool behind Town Hall would be removed and replaced by a splash pad.
Yeah.
As you know, there was a public outcry to save the pool, and the plan of record has since been revised. What role did you play in the discussion surrounding whether to keep the pool?
Yeah. So I'll tell you this. I was surprised, as I mentioned in my introduction, I was surprised by the announcement. I met with the supervisor. I was surprised to learn that the plan involved, the plan to move the pool was based on a community center study I mean, Councilmember Will can correct me if I'm wrong, that we hadn't even seen yet, let alone the public. And then I was upset to learn that members of the public who were reaching out to us were being told it's a done deal. So what I did was I said, as members of the public emailed me and called me, and they were upset. I responded to those emails by saying, yeah, I'd love to sit down and talk to you. And I got to tell you, those meetings weren't always like, happy, cheery meetings. Those meetings were a lot of people saying, you messed this up. And you know what? As a town official, yes, we did mess this up. And that's not to say that the idea of a town pool would work better over at a community center than behind town hall. We never had a chance to have the conversation because the information was presented as a done deal, and then you had community reaction. A better way to govern would be, hey, we are thinking about, we have a community center plan that shows us this is the path. Let's debate it. Let's discuss it. You asked me, Nick, my role in the pool conversation. I'll tell you that actually it's funny. This Senator Cooney and Assemblymember Clark called me, and we had conversations. I didn't have to I'm not going to sit here and claim to you that like I got the money. They both said, "Hey, we would be willing to put up the money to help keep the pool." Like, what do what are you guys doing? Is kind of what I heard from them. So I'm not going to claim to you that like I had some special role that got things done. My role, I guess, was I was frustrated. I met with many people in the group that came and advocated to save the pool, and I left the whole experience really feeling burned by the way we do business in Brighton, and it's part of what inspired me to say, yeah, we need to do business differently here.
Okay, the next question, and I want to say I did not write all of these questions, and some of them I just kind of paraphrased or put some exposition in, but these questions were generated as a really collective effort by a bunch of members of GIA, some of whom were not able to come to the meeting. They had conflicts, so that's why we wanted to record the video, and I know that the words are coming out of my mouth, but the questions aren't necessarily me.
Okay.
So the next question, and this is exposition I added, but Bill Moehle had been the town attorney for 18 years when he ran for supervisor. And his primary opponent, Susan Kramarski, had been town clerk for 11 years. And the question is, how do you square your own, frankly, lack of experience with your aspiration to the office? And kind of I'll do another two-parter, either direction. Have you been to the Association of Towns conference where town officials learn how to govern?
Yes, I saw you guys there. I know whoever asked this question, maybe they didn't see me there, but I saw Nick and Rob, I saw you guys there. Yes. So I've been to the Town Association of Towns meeting. and in New York City, and it was an amazing conference. I learned a lot there. I'll tell you briefly about my experience. I don't want to just rant on my resume, but I was in school in DC. There, I was a full-time intern at the Obama White House. I worked on Capitol Hill for Congressman Peter Welch, now Senator Peter Welch from Vermont. Um, I I left that job to manage a campaign for school board chair in Prince William County, Virginia. That county had not elected a Democrat countywide since the Civil War. And I met this guy, and he said, "Hey," he was telling me about how the school district had reassigned or laid off two employees after they confirmed that they were gay, and the parents complained. And so he said, "Look, I want to run for office, and I want to pass a non-discrimination act because what they did to these teachers is wrong." And no Democrat campaign manager with any experience took that job because it's just like there's no way you're going to win. But I took the job because maybe I'm just a competitive person, but also I felt like politics is the avenue to right wrongs. And so we took that job. My first day in the job, the chair of the Democratic Party, Prince William County, Virginia, met with me and said, "You guys are going to mess this up. I have a few House of Delegate seats that are winnable, but you guys running around talking about gay rights is going to ruin the election for Democrats." Thank God we won that campaign by going places that folks were shocked that we showed up. And that was kind of my hook into politics, and taught me to go places where people aren't necessarily going to agree with you and to have a conversation, because there were a lot more alike than you would think just on online discourse. And I managed a state senate race in Denver, Colorado. It was a district that was mostly African American, and as the white Jewish kid from Brighton, New York, it was so valuable to be in a community and learn about the city of Denver politics. Came back to Long Island, managed a state senate race, state assembly race. And then I felt like I wanted to get more government experience. I got my master's degree in public administration from the Maxwell School at Syracuse. I managed a state assembly race for Demond Meeks, and Demond and I met, and he gave me a similar story, which is I'm not going to win designation. No big players are going to come out and endorse me. The seat is going to be passed off to Ernest. But Nate, like, I have this burning desire to change the city of Rochester, and here's my plan. And I took that, and again, people in the Democratic Party in Monroe County, they came and met with me, and they said, you can't take this job. What are you doing? This guy has no chance." And we won that race. I became his chief of staff, and that was just such a great experience. And now I manage the communications for Monroe County's largest department, the Department of Human Services, where it's everything from financial assistance, food stamps, to heating, Monroe County the Office for the Aging, and so I believe I have a lot of experience. Do I have 30 years in this town hall? No, but I think that's a good thing, because I think that the ways of town hall need to change. And so I have a lot of government and political experience, and I'd like to bring that to the table here to change the way we do business, because I don't think the way we do business is serving the people of Brighton.
Okay, I'm going to use I language and say that I also have worked on political campaigns and helped political candidates win elections. And I personally consider that an entirely different skill set to contrast with governing. But that, so I'm.
Can I just say, Nick, I'll tell you
Sure.
the experience that I had on political campaigns. I think when you put on the slide a political professional, and I think you're right. Maybe I use those words myself, so I'm not criticizing your words there. But when you go and you do these campaigns, whether it's Denver or Long Island or Virginia, I was not like the guy in the skyscraper in Manhattan writing political mail. I mean, I was knocking doors 12 hours a day. And you meet people that are different from you, and you meet people that see the world differently. And that's government experience. That's experience in how do you lead a town full of people that some folks that I meet with are enthusiastic and they can't wait to hear my plans. And other folks, like some of the folks in this room tonight, are looking at me like I don't buy anything you're saying. And at the same time, the job is to serve everybody and to try to find common ground. And so in that way, I think that experience is relevant to what I'm trying to do.
Okay, does anyone have a question they want to ask Town Council Member Nate Salzman before we stop the recording? Cindy, you can unmute yourself, Cindy, and ask your question.
Hi, Nate. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
It's weird not to hear you as Mrs. Buttersworth.
You can call me Cindy.
Okay.
I just, you talk about transparency in government. You talk about equity and equality in government, housing, et cetera, affordable housing, all very progressive ideas.
Yeah.
However, your record of support of candidates in the past does not reflect that. And you and I have had that conversation as well. So I'm just a little bit leery of your stepping into this role with all of these progressive ideas that I have not yet seen you have.
Cindy, I appreciate the question. I'll tell you, I know that we have in the past disagreed about different candidates. I think that, Damon Meeks is by all accounts, maybe the most progressive member of the state delegation. Is somebody that I served as his campaign manager and then his chief of staff. My company that Nick referenced earlier, we worked for, Summer Brook and Suhue Smith and, a lot of members of the team that were very progressive. As a traveling, and I'll tell you this, I think, and I'll say this, I should say this, I aspire to be a coalition builder type of Democrat. If you're somebody who comes to the table and, you have a certain life perspective and you want to advance our ideals, I want to bring people to the table. And, I've not always worked for people that I've agreed with 100% of the time. The old political adage is if you want a candidate that you agree with 100% of the time, you should run. But I do feel proud of a lot of the folks I've worked with, and Cindy, I know that there are times that you and I disagree on candidates, and I think we do so from a good place. I mean, I respect the folks that you have supported as well, and at the end of the day, you run the primary. And by the way, I don't think primaries are a bad word, especially in a safe blue town like Brighton. I think there's nothing wrong with Democrats competing to get the best Democrat.
Yeah.
And then you shake hands and then you go out and you try to defeat the MAGA Republicans who are tearing apart our country right now. And so I appreciate the question though, and I've always understood where you stand, Sydney, and I think you're somebody who's always taken very principled stands in primaries as well.
Thank you.